So, in general, we're talking about, practice in our lives. And it's a kind of a really complicated issue that Ann and I are continuing to consider. One of the things that we're definitively considering is we are well aware that many, if not all of you, are working people. And, the classic model, Tibetans had a lot of time and space in their lives, and a lot of them were religious professionals. And there was a lot of social support for people to take time off to practice. And our culture is a 40-hour-a-week, 48 weeks out of the year kind of culture. There is a kind of funny way in which practice both requires a kind of strong intentionality, and we want to become a little bit aware of that intentionality. Two words that we often use with respect to this are willfulness and willingness. And depending on who you are and how you practice, maybe you approach practice with just a really graceful attitude of willingness from the get-go, or maybe you find getting up to speed requires a lot of willfulness, and that you can be willful and you can succeed, or you may find that when you're willful, you succeed, but it takes a lot out of you emotionally or out of your body, or you get stomach cramps, or you get a headache. So one of the reasons we're talking about dependent origination is that in some ways, really, dependent origination is trying to be an antidote to both, in a way, both unbalanced willfulness and unbalanced willingness. It would be too much willingness if you were to say, my hypothetical Bubba on the beach, hey, Buddha's grace, it's just there. I don't have to do anything. My true nature is already realized. Cool, smoke a joint. This is California Dzogchen. It's cool. When Anam Thupten was here, he was sort of describing this somewhat from firsthand experience. That's willingness to an extreme. But the other is, I've got to do my prostrations. I'm collecting my prostrations. Don't call me. I've got 500, and I've only done 495 today, and I've got 5 more. And this is very, very important. I might die tomorrow. I was telling Son when it was probably 1980, and I heard that Khetsen Rinpoche was having some trouble with his feet, and I was terrified that maybe he was having diabetes. I was all the way in southern India, and I don't know how we heard, but we heard he was having trouble with his feet, and I decided he must be having diabetic sores. I've got to go up to see him. So I fly from southern India all the way up to Nepal, and thank you, Fulbright, Senator Fulbright. I had a wonderful grant. And I get up there, and he basically had athlete's foot. But I think it was during that trip, I was also really immersed in this, life is impermanent, we don't know when we're going to die, and I don't know about when I'm going to get a chance to practice, and I don't know, and life is really indefinite. And I was telling him, Rinpoche, I'm really worried, I'm probably, I'm going to die, and I've got to practice. And he said, Harvey, you've done that already. Relax. Let your mind be easy, which was not the first or last time he ever told me that. This time for a funny Khetsen Sangpo story, just sort of along the same lines, but it's actually the opposite. But so, he was sort of easing me up. But at one point, Anne would typically be very, very insistent upon his coming. And she would say, Rinpoche, oh, please come, please come. And I'd always be very relaxed, and I never wanted to pressure him. And he had his ways. I mean, you really would have had to work with him over decades to appreciate how his ways were. But I just sort of made this proclamation to him once that, you know, Anne is really insisting. She really, like, you know, pressures, you know, for you to come. And I will never pressure you to come. I'll just never do that. I said fairly insistently. So then we arranged a tour at one point, and I don't know where Anne was, but I got she's in California. I get the phone call, and it's Khetsen Sangpa, and he had the sweetest voice, and he was a great actor. And he said, "Hi, Harvey," in Tibetan. We're in Bangkok, and there's some problems with my visa. I don't think we can come. And Migmar's, his wife, she's not feeling so well. I think we should probably cancel our trip this time. And Anne's in there. We've got this whole tour planned.
I was in California to meet him because he was going to land in San Francisco.
So we have this whole tour planned. And sure enough, Rinpoche, you've got to come. Rinpoche, you've got to come. You must come. You must come. You must come. And he would tend to do that with me in terms of whatever I was leaning one way, he would really just be completely the opposite, in a way, what I needed. So, and it's not atypical of Tibetan teachers, of just really pressing you in ways that sometimes don't even seem like they're pressing you, but it was a kind of a gift, you know, just to not hold on too tight to anything. So when we practice, we really, in a way, need to be best friends with ourselves and also consult with our teachers. You know, we're talking about something like foundational practices. They're sort of a Rorschach. You know, some people can't complete anything. Some people muscle through things. Some people muscle through, but it takes a lot out of them. And really, when we're talking about causes and conditions, we're really talking about causes and conditions. What supports a kind of practice? You know, we look at our time availability, we look at our bodies. Some people can't even do prostrations. There are other things we can do. If our bodies can do them, what are the causes and conditions that we have? Can we give ourselves 45 minutes a day to accumulate prostrations? Can we really do that? Do we need to create more motivation? You know, there's this whole science now in psychotherapy. There's a guy named Prochaska. It's a very small book, but and you can find, I'm sure, the summary of his work online, Prochaska. It's Stages of Change. And what he did was he looked at really the process of change in psychotherapy and divided it into something like 5. And the first is like what he calls even pre-contemplative. And that is like, that would be someone like walking by and seeing that there are courses here, and they're not even interested in the courses. I mean, they're pre-contemplative. I mean, or, you know, they're smokers, they're not even thinking about stopping smoking. But, you know, then you become contemplative, and then you actually sort of engage in something. And the teachings and the therapeutic interventions that are appropriate for a pre-contemplative and a person who's contemplative and a person who's actually engaged in, let's say, stopping smoking, the teachings, interventions, and so forth are all different. The fact that you're here means that you're really pretty serious and are actually eager to sort of up your motivation to engage in this practice. And so the motivational practices that we're doing, depending on what stage you're at, or, you know, if you're in later stages, you're doing different things, but you're either motivated or you're trying to increase your motivation or sustain your motivation, and that's a completely different sort of stage of practice than the person who, let's say, is just coming on Sunday who wants to have a little 10-minute respite once a week, and that's a great thing too. But if you really want to seriously engage in the practice, having these motivational exercises is very, very helpful, but to recognize that they're if you've actually gotten it, that life is impermanent and can change at any moment, maybe you don't need to keep tightening that screw. That screw's tight enough. Or you are really grateful for the life you have and the opportunity to study practice, and you sort of sense, I've got that, and now I'm ready to start accumulating. So then, if you've done, we are recommending 84 days of practice, then you're ready. But always working with yourself and us in terms of, some people will say, I just can't do it. I don't want to do it, or I've got this obstacle, and there are real obstacles. Sometimes it's an authority obstacle. Somebody says, do X, I just want to do Y. I'm sorry, this is how I'm wired. Okay, so we may spend months or years working with that issue, and that's fine. Some people, it's like, let me rip. Okay, that's fine. Somebody might say, let me rip, and they get 3/4 of the way through it, and it's like, this isn't working for me. Or, I really have purified, and now I feel like I really don't want to do this. It's like I hate it. I mean, the thought of doing this, I just get slow and groggy and overwhelmed, and there may be obstacles that we arrive at in practice. And so, but part of it is the causes and conditions. Anne and I are part of the causes and conditions. The lineage blessings are part of the causes and conditions. Our true nature is part of our causes and conditions, even though that's beyond causes and conditions. And so we try to use these reflections, but in a way it was lovely what Joseph brought up before. We have the classical reflections, but for some of you, just imagining the hell of getting 200 emails a day might be the only, suffering of cyclic existence you need to do. And that might really, you do that every day instead of thinking about hell and hungry ghosts and animals, and just think, I really want to be free of this hell. This is hell. And I want to have a state of mind that transcends the pressures of email. That might be the most effective practice for you. Maybe you just sort of touch into for 2 minutes, there are all these depictions of the hell beings and so forth, and I know when I do Vajrasattva, I'll be imagining the 6 realms, so it might be useful for me to know what those 6 realms is, but really much more motivational for me is thinking about Facebook and how I'm a Facebook slave. And some of us are. No blame. I mean, we're all slaves to something, most typically. So a really, really big thing is recognizing the dynamism of sort of tightening and loosening, practicing and resting. We say often that there is this quintessential instruction of Majik Lapdun, who I think is represented there, who brought the practice of Je, or severance, to Tibet. But her quintessential instruction for Dzogchen practice, which over the course of your practice can become more and more profoundly understood, is, and it's awkwardly translated, tighten with tightness, loosen with looseness. This is the essence of the view. So, if we're doing prostrations, that's tightening with tightness. It is definitely tightening. But after we do all of that activity, it really behooves us, whether we do it with refuge or we do it with Guru Yoga, there's a dissolution practice, that we do that practice and we sit a bit and see what it's like to dissolve, either have Guru Rinpoche dissolve into us if we're doing Guru Yoga, or have ourselves dissolve into Guru Rinpoche if we do refuge. What is that loosening with looseness like in that moment? And again, traditionally says, rest until, the first thoughts occur and then get up. Well, you could rest until your first thoughts come up, and then you can do some setting your breath and being, practicing attention with your breathing, and see how that is after you've done prostrations. How does prostrations affect your actual being with yourself after you've done 5, 10, or even 250? it does affect us. And there are the maybe overt and obvious physical things that occur, but there may be blessings, there may be purifications, and it's important to just sort of see, how's it affecting me? Maybe you feel worse. From time to time, Dharma practice will cough up some dust. You clean the room, dust comes into the air. It's part of cleaning. It's just part of the process. And I just think it's maybe a good way of talking about, and it's just a kind of opening. I don't know how else to open this, but to help you recognize that there's a movement from kind of a dualistic perceiving to a dualistic awareness to a more like being awareness. Rikpa, which is sort of the nature of the mind, is a being awareness. It's a presence awareness. It's a presence. It's not dualistic. It's a being that's a knowing. It's a knowing that's a being. And it's effortless. And most of our perception that we're used to requires some kind of focus, some kind of intentionality. We don't arrive at being awareness, presence, rikpa, nature of the mind, just like that, unless we're one of the one or two historical outstanding figures who had such amazing karma that, you just hear one word and you're there. And those are called the instantaneous realizers, the suddenists. And there is, in Zen, there's a whole big history of sudden gradual debates, and there's a whole big history even in Tibetan Buddhism about sudden and gradual. And so there are some people who, you just say Dzogchen to, and they're there. But if you really press the teachers on how many of them are there, we know one is Indrabhuti, and I don't know if anybody else is. and Khetsen Rinpoche would often tell the story of Indrabhuti. And there was sort of a joke about it because he would start telling it and Anne would be translating and then she would get lost and I would usually pick it up. But he got it. But otherwise, most of us are gradualists. And gradual requires effort. But really an effort that can combine tightening with tightness and loosening with looseness. And you might be on one extreme or the other. You might be, I just love those dissolution parts of the practice, and I do 3 prostrations, then I just sort of merge with Guru Rinpoche and I'm gone. That's an extreme. Or, I do 300 prostrations and then I, do 5 seconds of merging and resting because I just got to get there. Well, every day you have an opportunity to get there and to rest. And in our culture, if anything, I think the cultural propensity here is to not know how to rest, aside from California. I'm sorry. Friends in California, please forgive me. But, many, many people, including most of those who are listening from California, are doers. And we don't know how to rest. And there's a wonderful phrase in Tibetan, lukpe shak, lukpe shak. Lukpa is just like, and shak just means to settle. Lukpe shak. It's just relax and drop into it, drop into your nature. And what's strange is it's not just drop into your nature cold, it's tighten with tightness and then drop into your nature, loosen with looseness. So there's a dynamism and a dynamic interplay between those two motions until you're at a point where you're realizing your own true nature perpetually and it's effortless. And then, interestingly enough, people continue to practice, even though they're always there. Because it's an expression. from the loosen with looseness, they're expressing tightness with tightness because it's just, that's what you do. You just express things. You're not just going to sort of, again, be, Bubba on the beach when, I'm there, I realize my nature, permanent Medicare, the equivalent, spiritually, I do nothing. No, now you continue to do your practices, you have recitations. All the teachers we've ever had, they do hours of their morning recitation, including His Holiness. Hours and hours of their recitations. Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, hours of recitation. It's just an expression of, if you know how to do ballet, you do ballet. If you are realized, you do your recitations, and then you teach, and you're with people. It's all an expression of it. Nothing is better than the other. Anne?
We've really been considering throughout the day and beyond this day as well, what is it that will wake us up, really? As we start to see how profoundly connected we are to our habit patterns, to our reaction patterns, how this sense of I that maybe is still difficult to actually identify, but that we're starting to see is really the springboard for all of this reactivity and cyclical process and endless, going round and round and round again and again and again in the same circles. So what will wake us up? What will actually bring about change? We started asking that on Tuesday. We're still asking it. And clearly our resources have to do with the teachings, the teachers, and the Sangha, the three jewels, after all, the Buddha, the enlightened being who began this tradition in this world system, and the teachings, and all of us, Sangha, right? And how can Sangha be of help? And Julian asked about that on Tuesday night as well. And it's really very significant. We can look at practice through the lens of what we learn. We can look at practice through the lens of quintessential instructions, like Harvey was talking about. Tighten with tightness, loosen with looseness. The essence of the view is there. And then we can also look at practice in terms of how it is, what it has to do with our everyday life and our relationships with other people. And we are people who we work, we have families, so being with people is not going to go away. And we have also a very special opportunity to be with each other, to be with people, all the people in our lives, and also those of us who choose to give a practice a priority in our lives. And all of the three jewels really are ways of lighting our way out of the sleep of ignorance. And I think it's pretty clear how the teacher, the Buddha, and the teachings do that, and how our own practice, seated on the cushion, might do that. But what about being with each other? In what way do we support each other? And it might just be, I actually think it's quite wonderful, simply for all of us to hold that as a question is already a great step forward. But in a very important way, when we are together in a teaching and in a series of teachings, and we definitely include those of you who are with us virtually and who we hope will come sometimes, if possible. We are part of a holding, a mandala, an organism, a kind of body of energy, really, an intentionality that is oriented toward the teaching. And that itself, as we said on Tuesday, that itself, being in the presence of other people who hold the teaching and hold you as in your role as a practitioner as important, is already very heartening. Because mostly we go around the world and we are whatever we are, doctors or managers or professionals of one kind or another, or we're parents, or there are many people in our lives who don't see us as practitioners, right? And that makes it harder for us to see ourselves as practitioners also. One's identity is something one gains through the reflection of another. Harvey gave a wonderful talk about that some time back. So that's one thing. The very basic level. We come here, we recognize that we're all practitioners. And also, as practitioners who are really quite honestly engaged in looking at our reaction patterns and seeing how extremely difficult it is to actually make a dent in them, you can't help but notice this if you've been practicing for a while, right? It's really tough. So that allows us, I think, to develop a very particular, really an exquisite kind of patience for ourselves. You can call it patience. It's an expression of compassion for ourselves. We have good intentions. And does it mean that we're perfect from dawn to dusk every day? Well, clearly it doesn't, right? We goof up, we get caught up, we do again and again the very things that we've vowed we'll never do again. And so after a while, we just kind of get it that, as Harvey was pointing out, we actually can't make these patterns go away. We can't. We can't just make it happen. It's a process. It's a nourished process, nourished by our own intention, by blessings, by time passing, and us remaining steadfast in our intention.